On a sunny evening, on a purple sunshot evening, under wide flowering chestnut trees, upon a threshold full of dust, yesterday, today, the days are all like these. Trees flower forth in beauty, lovely too. Their very wood all gnarled and old, that I am half afraid to peer into their crowns of green and gold. The sun has made a veil of gold, so lovely that my body aches. Above the heavens shrieks with blue, convinced I've smiled by someone's some mistake. The world ablooms and seems to smile. I want to fly, but where? How high? If I'm barbed wire, things can bloom. Why couldn't I? I will not die. 1944, written by children in the bracts of Transian.
Thank you, Mrs. Good evening. I'm Patty Berkowitz, president of B'nai Israel. Rabbi Eric Polikoff could not be here tonight. I am honored to share his remarks. As I welcome you to the Jewish Federation of Western Connecticut's annual Yom HaShoah Commemoration for 5784, 2024, under the auspices of Federation's Max and Faye Katz Fund, philanthropy that remains timely. For many years, our congregation has been privileged to host this event here in our sanctuary, which brings together community leaders and members, distinguished clergy, talented singers, students, and guests. Many who attend our commemorations are the children, grandchildren, or great-grandchildren of survivors. And the importance of memory is part of their very essence, and ours. Yet knowledge of the Holocaust is slipping, and its uniqueness and lessons are increasingly trivialized and belittled. During the pandemic, partisans felt free to appropriate Holocaust imagery as anti-mask or anti-vaccine activists compared public health mandates to cattle cars leading to death camps. Now there's an explosion of misinformation and misapplication as pro-Hamas activists on college campuses and their apologists erroneously and shamefully labeled the war in Gaza a genocide and then conflate it with the Holocaust. So at a time when big lies are swallowed and copycatted, what shall we do? Clearly, fulfilling our sacred pledge to the Holocaust's millions of victims and to the survivors whom we have known will require more effort and focus going forward, not less. And given the wildfire of anti-Semitic and anti-Zionism, it will also require a heightened determination to likewise defend against the erasure of the State of Israel and her 7.2 million Jews. Tonight, we recall that the Nazis' goal was unique. They sought a world without a single Jew and put Germany's fullest resources into their murder plans. Most of Europe's Jews were abandoned by their neighbors with efficiency and enthusiasm. The Nazis and their accomplices slaughtered 6 million. We remember the Holocaust by bullets, disease and starvation, slave labor and sadistic medical experiments, and specially constructed gas chambers at factories of death. Bearing witness to this history and to how Jews continually tried to resist, survive, and fight, we will not permit remembrance to be forgotten or corrupted. Instead, we will share our learning and our stories. May we utilize every tool from social conversation to social media to engage and instruct. Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks of blessed memory once observed that there was a difference between optimism and hope. Optimism is the belief that things will get better. Hope is the belief that together we can make things better. Optimism is a passive virtue, hope an active one. It takes no courage to be an optimist, but it takes a great deal of courage to have hope. Knowing what we do of our past, no Jew can be an optimist. But Jews have never, despite a history of sometimes awesome suffering, given up hope. Tonight, we avow agency and hope, and let us say, Ken Hi Ratzon, be this God's will. Thank you. And I now invite forward Eli Raver, another student of the B'nai Israel Religious School. Oh, no Eli, it'll be Jackie Schulafand, our education director.
I am a Jew. I am a Jew and will be a Jew forever. Even if I should die from hunger, never will I submit. I will always fight for my people on my honor. I will never be ashamed of them. I give my word. I am proud of my people, how dignified they are. Even if I am suppressed, I will always come back to life. Written by Franta Bass, age 14, Terezin.
Shall James Eileen, you're welcome to do that. Sue and Tom Weiss. Cindy and Rose Frankel, and Elaine Sadler. Bert Simply. Jackie Schufin.
Right, this is on behalf of June Gaston, in memory of Agnes Einhoff Gaston, mother in Regensburg. Marta Gluck, grandmother, Auschwitz. Peter Gluck Gaston, uncle, Auschwitz. And Sarah Gaston, aunt, in Auschwitz.
Margie Sherman. Kathy Marks, I'm lighting a candle for David
doesn't know the world at all, who stays in his nest and won't come out. He doesn't know what birds know best, know what I want to sing about, 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 that the world is full of loveliness. When dewdrops sparkle in the grass, and earth's aflood with morning light, a blackbird sings upon a bush to greet the morning after night, to greet the dawning after night, to greet the dawning after night, to greet the dawning after night. Then I know how good it is to be alive. Open up your hearts to beauty and go to the woods someday and weave a wreath of memories. 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 If the tears obscure your way, if the tears obscure your way, if the tears obscure your way, you will know how good it is to be alive.
The butterfly. The last, the very last, so richly, brightly, dazzling yellow. Perhaps if the sun's tears would sing against a white stone, such a yellow, is carried lightly way up high. It's sent away, I'm sure because it wished to kiss the world goodbye. For 7 weeks I have lived here, penned up inside this ghetto, but I have found what I love here. The dandelions call to me, and the white chestnut branches in the court. Only I never saw another butterfly. The butterfly was the last one. Butterflies don't live here in the ghetto. 1942, Pavel Friedman.
Wherever you may be, whenever that may be, I shall be there with you, the last survivor. Because you will be the last survivor, I shall be there, I promise you. I promise to be the memory of your memory. I promise that what you have endured will not be erased from the human conscience. I promise you this ultimate justice, that neither your name nor your suffering shall be permitted to vanish from world history. You were one man, one woman, but it is as if you had been one suffering humanity, and because you will be the last, it will be my duty to take over your martyrdom as one takes over in a relay, not in order to relive it, but to relate it for all time, to bear witness before history in order that criminals shall no longer be absolved, to teach children that, having become adults, they may build a society conscious of its past and resolutely turn towards a future of justice, love, and peace.
It is time for the recitation of the El Malay Rokamin prayer. Can we all stand up, please? El Malay Rokamim Shochen Bamromim Tamse Minucha Nechona Tacha Kampe Hashkina Im Kiroshim Utuharim Kizaharakia Masirim the Nishmot Yakirenu Shahu Le'olamam Habahal Harachamim Yastivim Beseter Kenevav Le'olamim V'yitzror b'yitzror hachayim et nishmatam Adonai hu nachalatam V'yanuku v'shalom el nishkavam v'nomar Amen.
I invite you to remain standing, and if you have a siddur near you, there should be in your chairs, page 533. Page 533 in our prayer books, if you have available to you. A very special and unique Kaddish. This Kaddish is one for Yom HaShoah, and it speaks of where we died. And today, surely a new Kaddish could be written in a similar vein for what happened on October 7th. The past is the present. The past doesn't just inform the present, it shapes it and we continue to live it. This version of Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish for Yom HaShoah, is unique for this day of memorial. It's a time and it's a reminder that interwoven with the sacredness of God's name and the constancy of our rituals is the inhumanity with which man and woman commit to humanity with evil. Even our sacred prayer is no longer the same. But even with the profanation and the desecration of the divine, which was the Shoah, our seeking and naming the divine continues. Kaddish LeYom HaShoah. Yitgadal Auschwitz, V'yitkadash Lodz, Shemei Rabbah, Ponar, Be'alma Divara Chirutei Babiyar, V'yamlich Malchutei Maidanek, B'chayechon Uv'yomechon, Birkanau, Uv'chayei Dechol Beit Israel, Kovno, Ba'agalau V'zman Kariv, Janauska, V'imeru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach Le'olam Ulamei Almaya, Yitbarach V'yishtabach Theresienstadt, V'yitpa'ar V'yitromam Buchenwald, V'yitnaseh V'yithadar Treblinka, V'yitale v'yitalal Vilna, Shemed Kudisha, Berichu, Bergen-Belsen, Le'ela, Mauthausen, Min Kol Birchata v'Shirata, Dachau, Tush Bechata v'Nechemata, Minsk, Da'miran Be'alma, Vorsha, V'imeru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba min Shemaya, V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Osei Shalom bimromav, Uyasei Shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. May the one who makes peace in the high heavens above make peace for us, for all of Israel, for all who are bereaved, and for all who remember. And let us say, Amen.
I lived in the ghetto here for more than a year, in Terrazin in the Black Town now. And when I remember my old home so dear, I can love it more than I did somehow. Ah, home, home. Why did they tear me away? Here the weak die easy as a feather, and when they die forever. I'd like to go back home again. It makes me think of sweet spring flowers before when I used to live at home. It never seemed so dear and fair. I remember now those golden days. But maybe I'll be going there soon again. People walk along the street. You see at once on each you meet that there's ghetto here, a place of evil and of fear. There's little to eat and much to want, where bit by bit it's hard to live. But no one must give up. The world turns and time change. Yet we all hope the time will come when we'll go home again. Now I know how dear it is, and often I remember it. 1943, Anonymous.
Number of
Our organized Jewish community will also come together here this Thursday at 7 p.m. to hear Yossi Klein Halevi. Himself a member of the second generation, he is one of Israel's leading thinkers. We are truly fortunate to have him with us, thanks to the efforts of Rabbi Mark Cohn of Temple Shalom of New Milford. Prior to Yossi's talk at 7 p.m., B'nai Israel of Southbury's Israel Advocacy Committee is sponsoring a rally, Let My People Go, a rally to free the hostages. Hamas continues to hold captive hostages from many nations and of many faiths, from toddlers to women to the aged and infirm. Kindly gather at 6 p.m. Please RSVP your attendance to Kathy Conti of the Jewish Federation. We look forward to seeing you Thursday. Now, there's a brief little change in the program, and I apologize. At this time, I should be introducing to you Mr. Ralph Falkenstein of the United Jewish Center. However, there has been, he's fine, but there has been an accident on 84, which is holding him up from getting here. So the members of Danbury are struggling to get east to us. They believe they will make arrival around 7:30. So I'm hoping that people can maybe talk amongst themselves for a few minutes, because it's really actually very exciting. I would like to be able to introduce him because he is going to present author Irene Stern-Frelich, author of Shattered Stars, Healing Hearts. I'm going to, I'm a teacher, so I'm going to allow you to talk amongst yourselves and use your cell phones. And then we're hoping as the minute they arrive, we will begin the program again. So thank you so much for your patience and understanding.
helping out. Helping out.
Ready to go with the author.
Ladies and gentlemen, if I could ask you to take your seats. Come on back. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Have a seat, get comfortable. I appreciate that you stayed. Thank you, thank you.
When you figure it out, if you need us help.
I know that 7:30, that is actually very impressive, and I want to get right to this. So very quickly, I would like to introduce Mr. Ralph Falkenstein of the United Jewish Center. He will present author Irene Stern-Frelich, author of Shattered Stars, Healing Hearts. QTV? Did it work? I don't have a good stand-up act to keep people entertained. I am a teacher, so I can do some things, but you need to put it on. You need to put it on a different. And our amazing technique, and Stephen is in back, so he will get this up and running. Technology is great when you need it, right? Sometimes. It's all good.
And I'd like to tell you about my father, Walter Stern. He was a Holocaust survivor. As is the case for many children of survivors, I lived most of my life holding secrets I didn't exactly know about. There was just an undercurrent of not talking about it. All I knew was that my father escaped Germany with his family on Kristallnacht at the age of 12, and survived hiding on the Lansing farm somewhere in Holland. I also knew that he painted this brooch with the words Tikvat Yisrael, Hope for Israel, while he was in hiding on the Lansing farm. He gave it to me when I was around 10 years old, and I knew it was special, but I didn't understand the story around it. As you heard, shortly before my father's death in 1994, he made a testimony video. He sent it to my brother and me and my cousin. Actually, he didn't send it. I subsequently learned that it was sent to us by a friend after he had died. Thus, we could never possibly talk about it. I watched it once and I put it away, not being able to follow his chronology or understand the names of the places or the names of the people that he said. And of course, while he was alive, I had never asked him the questions that I carried with me. I didn't want to cause him more pain, and I assume he didn't want to cause me pain by telling me the stories. I took out the video again in 2017, very recently. And this time, I could Google the places he talked about and I could locate them on Google Maps, an amazing thing to help me do this. I also gained a clearer understanding of the photos, documents, and letters I had kept from my father's things. And that got me eager, that's my word, my husband's word is obsessed. That got me eager to find out more. In 2018, with my husband Seth and our oldest son Josh, I took the first of 3 trips to physically retrace my father's footsteps. And so I invite you on the journey with my father and me as he escapes from Nazi Germany and survives in Holland, and as my family and I travel in his footsteps and see some of the locations where at least 18 individuals who helped my father's family demonstrated courage, compassion, and kindness. These are the people who risked their livelihoods and their lives to do what they considered to be the right thing. They acted, they did something. They weren't simply bystanders. Now, my purpose today is not to make you angry or sad. It is a sad day, but I don't intend to make you sadder. But it is to move you to act, to find ways that all of us can demonstrate our own courage, compassion, and kindness in this very challenging world. Let me introduce you to my father and his family. There's my dad, Walter, on the bottom. His parents are Moritz and Hilda. I knew Hilda well. She was my Oma, my grandmother, so you'll hear me refer to her as Oma. Some people in this room remember Oma. And her parents were Sally, who died when Oma was 9 months old, and Selma. Selma remarried Edward, and they had Kurt. So Kurt is my great half-uncle. And these are the places we'll visit. Starting in Bocholt, which is in red, it's the only town in Germany that we'll be visiting. The other places are all in the Netherlands, AKA Holland. They just all call it Holland. And the green line shows the border between Germany and Holland. So in 1902, my great-grandmother Selma is already living in Bocholt, Germany, with her daughter Hilda, my Oma, and Selma's soon-to-be second husband, Edward Hertzfeld, arrives in 1910 and marries Selma soon after. They have their son Kurt in 1913. And Edward sets up Hertzfeld, a clothing and textile store. The family lives in the top 2 floors of the building. By 1926, my grandfather, Moritz Stern, comes to Bocholt to run the Hertzfeld store. Moritz marries my Oma, and they have my father 9 months later. There's my father in the baby carriage with his head sticking out. They live 1 block away from the town hall, and this is what it looked like around 1930. I actually found this photo on the Bocholt Archives Facebook page, which has a lot of old photos on it. It's very cool. Up to this point, my family lives a relatively good life, as did most German Jews of the time. They're German citizens, they own a successful business, and they expect a decent, if not a good life. In 1933, Hitler comes into power, and he immediately declares a national boycott of Jewish businesses. On April 1st, 1933, the windows of my family's store were shattered for the first of many times. This is not their store. Customers begin to fear coming into the Hertzfeld store, so my grandfather Moritz bikes to customers to take their orders, bikes back, fills the order, and then bikes back to their homes with the goods. They didn't have cars, but biking was very common in this area. Now, this is what the town hall and the building across the street from it looked like in the 1930s, after Hitler was in power. My father, at the age of 8, 9, and 10, has to walk between these buildings to go to school. And you'll see the slogan on top of that town hall is Ein Reich, ein Volk, ein Führer. 1 state, 1 people, 1 leader. In 1935, you may know of the Nuremberg laws. They go into effect. And they are race-based laws that, among other things, define who is a Jew. Among many restrictions placed on the Jews, the laws prohibit intermarriage, they strip Jews of their German citizenship, and they restrict employment. After the Nuremberg laws, Jews are forbidden from flying the Nazi flag or colors. Not sure they would have wanted to before, but now they're not even allowed to. And this is another photo from the Bocholt Archives Facebook page. This one is of the street pretty much around the corner from where my family's home was. And as my father walks down these streets as a child, he shared in his testimony video that kids would spit at him, they would throw rocks, and they would call him Dirty Jew. And he's not permitted to retaliate in any way out of fear that his father would be sent to a concentration camp. This sweet boy is so traumatized that he needs sedatives to calm him. My grandfather Moritz expects things to worsen, so he makes plans to protect his family. I didn't know these details until I listened to my father's testimony video. And I'd like my father to help tell a part of the story. So let's listen to an audio clip from his video.
My father was smuggling his own money into Holland on weekends on a bicycle. He removed the saddle and he had a rubber tube filled with money and he slid it all the way down into the tube of the bicycle.
So this is the Google Maps approximate 7-mile bike ride that my husband and I took to recreate their bike ride.
Riding in Holland to go and visit, on a nice Sunday afternoon, somebody, and he would go to Holland to see this particular rabbi, and he would have a special rod there in Holland with a hook on it, and pull the money out again, and the rabbi would then the next day deposit that money for us in the Dutch bank.
We weren't allowed to talk about it, so my father says he didn't even know about this at the time because he was a kid and he wasn't allowed to tell anybody if he did know. So Seth and I also visited Alton, and this is us in front of the synagogue. The synagogue is next to the former rabbi's home, and it's still standing and acts mostly as a museum. Back in Bocholt, it is November 1938. My father's birthday is on November 10th. He's turning 12. And this is the family unit and approximately what they look like at this time, give or take a year or so. Let's hear what happens on November 9th to 10th. It's a violent night, a night that will become known as Kristallnacht, which, as you heard, means the night of broken glass. It's also the night the Stern family, and Sterne in German means stars, the Stern family was shattered. Let's hear from my father.
There were numerous men in brown uniforms on the street holding a steel I-beam and poking not only the windows but also poking into the doors and the clothing that was hanging in the store. It sounded like the sound was so shrill and loud.
My animations aren't working right. They usually do work right. And they're all playing at the same time instead of one after the other. So we're going to give it one more try and see if that'll work. You can go ahead and go to the next slide.
There were numerous men in brown uniforms on the street holding a steel I-beam and poking not only the windows but also poking into the doors and the clothing that was hanging in the store. It sounded like the sound was so shrill and loud. Then it was a great shock to us, and then we heard also gunshots. It was a vibration in the air, and I found it directed us what it meant. They meant to escape through the roof. They really wanted to get rid of us. He has always planned an escape route.
All right, so you get the idea. I'm so sorry. I'm not sure why that happened like that. But you get the idea that there were gunshots in the street. They knew things were serious now, and my grandfather directed them to the roof. And my father ends with, they always had an escape plan. He had an escape plan in many different ways. And now I need help getting this to the next slide, please. One more. So while that's coming up, once on the rooftop, my family waits for things to quiet down. And that night, more than 7,500 Jewish-owned businesses are destroyed throughout Germany. 7,500. That night, the crowd of brown shirts in Bocholt moves on to destroy the synagogue, just a 5-minute walk from my family's home. And across Germany, more than 267 synagogues are also destroyed, many burnt to the ground. On the left is a photo of the interior of the Bocholt synagogue, taken some years before the destruction by my Uncle Kurt, who was a photographer. And on the right is a photo of the synagogue after the destruction. It turns out that the brown shirts had gotten as far as pouring kerosene all over the floor of the synagogue, and their neighbor, who was a Nazi, who owned a lumber company right next door to the synagogue, ordered them to not burn it down because his business would have gone up with it. While the Bocholt synagogue is being destroyed, my family hides toward the rear of their building,
facing a neighbor in the rear who was a good man. His name was Imping. And Imping was a keeper of horses for other people, race horses, etc. Also, he made a living with burning coffee. They had these old-fashioned coffee burning machines. He had a large property, and my father was opening the window, standing on a ladder, on the small ladder, step ladder. And through the night, he was hiding us in his hayloft, and he also was providing us with a limousine to take us to the border. That is at the risk of his own life.
Mr. Imping is the first of 18 individuals to help my family survive, and the limo driver is the second. He drives my family to the Dutch border and drops them off at a spot that my grandfather directs him to, according to his plan, just on the German side of the town in Holland called Mechelen, which is one of the reasons I didn't understand what my father was saying. This is what Mechelen looks like now, and this photo was taken by our son Josh from his drone. He actually brought his drone, yeah. I learned from my father's testimony video that my grandfather has a customer who owns a farm that is half in Holland and half in Germany. And so Maritz's plan is to cross the border on the customer's farm from Germany into Holland. And the limo driver drops him off near this square on the map on the German side of the border. Let's listen.
And there my father says, wait. And we were hiding in a ditch. It was a dry ditch, and they put our heads down, and he waited for the gendarme on the German side who was guarding the border there to go at 11:45 to take his bicycle, noontime, to go home for lunch. And at 12 o'clock, the new gendarme would arrive in order to guard this area.
Now, I didn't understand what my father meant by a ditch, but when we got there were these deep ditches all over the place. And that's Josh, who jumped into one of the ditches to take some pictures. So I could see that they could hide if somebody was a little distance away. On Thanksgiving morning, during my second trip, Josh and I decided to walk from Germany across the border in this spot that we later confirmed was the exact spot where my family crossed. And here's what I videoed as I walked. We're not getting the audio. Farmer's house where my family escaped on the day after Kristallnacht. And we're taking a path near that farm. And in one moment, we're going to be crossing the border into the Netherlands, as my family did 80 years ago this month in this very cold weather, wearing only their pajamas and coats. And right now, I give Thanksgiving that we were able to be here. I still get choked up about that. That was the wind blowing, it wasn't static. It was cold. It was cold, and I had my nice warm coat. Now, this is Josh just crossing over the border into Mechelen on the other side of that border fence that's there today, looking over at that farmhouse. And in 1938, our family continues up this road for about a half a mile to this location, to a house owned by a baker named Jan Duking. We learned that he helped a lot of refugees during the war years. Let's listen to my father's recounting of the next part of their escape.
In Mechelen, there was a turnaround street. On the right-hand side, the Dutch police came. There were 3 of them and arrested us. On the right-hand side, the Dutch marechaussee, which is like state troopers, state police, came and they wanted to arrest us. And the Dutch police said to the state troopers, no, they're under our jurisdiction, we got to them first, we are arresting them, they're in our custody. The state trooper says, you can't do that. The state is more important than your little town. He said, you will have to take it up with the Congress, you have to take it up with the Queen. We have the law, and these people are in our custody, and over our dead body, you'll get to these people.
That's my father's recollection. So the local police placed my family under house arrest for their own safety, and in nearby Henringen is where they're bought, Henringen with a G at the beginning. One of the reasons they're permitted to stay in Holland is that they have money in Holland. Remember that money that my grandfather smuggled across the border? And Harry Slager, a Dutch relative who had managed the bank account for the smuggled funds, comes to Henringen to vouch for my family and tell the authorities that my family can come live with him. Let's listen to more about the situation for my family in Henringen.
And we were guarded by the local police. This was during a time of about 10 days, where every day my father would approach or go to the mayor in town. He had to report to him, so to prove that we were still there and did not escape. The mayor would try to legalize our stay in Holland. And of course, Congress turned us down. We would have to be sent back to Germany. And the Senate, which was the Dutch Senate, a similar organization as here, called different, was saying no, send us back. The Justice Department said no, they cannot stay, we will have to be sent back to Germany. Ultimately, the mayor said, I will send these people back.
Yeah, so this was one of those, the animation somehow doesn't work any longer. I'll read it. And ultimately, the mayor said, I'm appealing to the Queen, that is Queen Wilhelmina, as my father says, and she gave us a stay. All right, now he said to her, I will send these people back over my dead body. I refuse to do it. My conscience will not allow it to do that. If yours does, please say so. And she says, no. I can't send those people back. It turns out that a huge influx of German Jewish refugees crossed the border into Holland that month of November 1938 and afterwards, and Queen Wilhelmina has to do something. So she sets up a refugee camp outside the northern town of Westerbork in Holland. Has anybody ever heard of Westerbork? My family is fortunate in that they have means and they are able to live independently. They don't end up at Westerbork. In fact, these are the homes where my family stay in Henringen for about 6 months as they await their furniture and things, which is a mystery that I eventually solved and that I don't really talk about today, but if you have questions, I can answer them later. And that's when my family moves from Henringen to the town where Harry Slager lives in Enschede. On September 1st, 1939, that's a few months after they've moved to Enschede, Germany invades Poland, and World War II has begun. A couple of months later, my father becomes a bar mitzvah in this beautiful synagogue. It still exists today and is still in use, and it's also a museum now. I was so taken with it, I had to video it for you. Just a few months later, in May of 1940, Germany invades Holland, and Queen Wilhelmina leaves for the UK, and in 5 days, Holland capitulates. Within days of that, my grandfather Moritz and Uncle Kurt are arrested, and they are eventually sent to labor camps in France. Actually, we have this drawing of my grandfather that is smuggled out of Camp Rivesaltes, and I have a reproduction of this in the next room over if you want to come look at it afterwards. In January 1942, the final solution to the Jewish problem, or Jewish question, is formalized in a place in Germany called Wannsee. Although plans had already been in place to exterminate all Jews, the mass killings were already in place. This conference ensured that those in attendance understood the plans. And remember Camp Westerbork that I mentioned earlier, the one that Queen Wilhelmina had set up as a refugee camp? Shortly after the Wannsee Conference, Camp Westerbork is taken over by the Nazis, and it becomes a transit camp from which about 97,000 Jews out of 102,000 in Holland would be shipped to their deaths. I located information about Moritz, my grandfather, on the Yad Vashem website. Here's what I learned. In Drancy, France, on August 31st, 1942, Moritz and over 1,000 people, including hundreds of French children, are herded onto a train. It is transport number 26, train 901-21. Destination, Auschwitz-Birkenau, extermination camp, Poland. The rest of his family would not learn of his fate until well after the war, and he was immediately gassed on arrival. Let's return to Holland. In April 1942, Jews in all of Holland are now required to wear their yellow Jude star. A formerly Jewish-owned textile factory that was then Nazi-run had to create the yellow stars for all of Holland, which they do in 3 days. This is my father's actual Jude star, and I have the actual star with me today. If you'd like to see it up close, I'd be happy to show it to you. I'm not letting go of it, but I'd be happy to show it to you. And the Nazis are rounding up Jews very systematically now. On October 3rd, 1942, expecting a roundup, my Oma accesses the well-connected underground and pays someone they refer to as a smuggler to take her, her son, and her mother into hiding. My father, who's 15 at the time, he rides one bicycle and the smuggler rides the other bicycle. On the back of my father's bicycle, on the luggage rack on the back, is my grandmother. And on the back of the smuggler's bicycle is my great-grandmother. She's 70 years old at the time. Let's listen to what my father says in his testimony video.
We drove into the dark out of town. We circumvented the guards that were placed at the end of town, and we came through the dirt roads used by the farmers. We finally arrived after an hour and a half of bicycle riding. We arrived on a farm, and we were brought indoors, and there was one son and another son, and the boss himself greeting us, and they were staring at us like we were from outer space, and not knowing what was going on really. And that night we were sleeping on the floor in the living room.
So this is one son, and then here's the boss himself is supposed to show up. So hopefully you'll get a glimpse of him. So they arrive at the Lansing farm in St. Isidore's Hoover. Now before I started my research, I never dreamt I'd be able to visit any of these places, much less the farm where my father was hidden. But we were able to. And there's the boss. Okay, and here we are in June 2018, joined by my brother and sister-in-law, looking at the renovated farmhouse from Josh's drone. This shot is the reason he brought his drone on this trip. In 1942, this structure was actually half home and half cow barn attached. And under the blue box there is where my father, my Oma, and my great-grandmother hid in the attic. The family who now lives in the former Lansing home had been expecting us. They invited us inside and up the stairs toward the attic where my family had hidden. Here, we approached the area of the closet that my father suggested be built to hide the secret door to the attic. And we entered the attic. They still needed a living quarter within the attic, so let's listen.
And then later on, the next day, he got a carpenter, and I helped the carpenter to build a hiding corner, nook, underneath the roof. It was a slanted roof with shingles, and they just timbered it off with the hay and the straw was on the other side, so we could make a nice little living quarter out of it, with a hot plate in it, and a pail as a latrine covered with a potato sack, and we would go down a few steps to our little nook.
The original nook was a couple of steps further down than what you see in this image before the house renovation, but there wasn't a lot of headroom. And one of the things my father does while in hiding is he listens to the BBC on one of the 6 illegal radios that are hidden away with the Jewish people, right? They're all illegal. Let's listen to my father's description of something he heard. And I just want to tell you that this part is a little bit graphic.
The British would tell us in detail what was going on over the radio. And I just, it hit me like a shock, and I could see my father burning in the oven. I could see all this, just imagination, you're young. At the time I was 17 years of age, 16, 17 years of age. I did not tell my mother or my grandmother what I heard. I just left it alone. I just digested it for myself. And I had to digest it for a while.
He was right. His father had been killed in Auschwitz in September 1942. And that, of course, was even before they had gone into hiding. And this is a picture of my brother David and me standing in the attic section just outside that little nook. Let me ask you this. When you're isolated, unable to be with friends or go outdoors, there are no electronics except for the illegal radios. How would you pass the time? My father does chores, such as butter churning, believe it or not, and he does crafts, such as painting wooden brooches, like the one that I have. My son Josh actually made these replica tokens that we used as our trip symbol, and we left one at each ancestral grave we visited. Jan Lansink, the boss, as my father calls him, risks his life and the lives of his grown children, and yet they choose to hide my family, 3 other Jewish people, plus 17 others, conscientious objectors and the like. My father shared in his video that there were 6 close call stories, and here's one of them. This is actually one story that I heard from him in person. One summer day, it is just too hot in the attic. My father says, I heard boots, army boots, coming up the stairs. My mother and grandmother, he says, were sitting in a bedroom upstairs, knitting at an open window, and I did not have enough time to get them into the attic because they were sitting 2 bedrooms down. I quickly took the pail, the latrine, into the nook. I closed the closet door and closed my door, locked it up. I just heard them now speak to my mother, he continues. And my mother was answering him, and they disappeared again. And then my mother and my grandmother quickly came running into the nook. They knocked on the door. I opened it. I let them in. I locked up again. And they were pale in their face like a sheet. What did happen? Well, the tall policeman was standing in the bedroom doorway, looking at my father's mother and grandmother. He was blocking the view of the short policeman who was standing behind him, and the women could see the short policeman's hat going over the tall man's shoulder, trying to see what was going on. The tall policeman lied, telling the short one that it was the farmer's wife, that she was not dressed well. She was going to bed now. Please don't look. The tall policeman, my father goes on to share, was a man of the Dutch underground who distributed food coupons to hiding Jewish people. And he was aware that people were hidden on this farm. He knew about it. That's why he was going there. Due to the strong, amazing resistance, particularly in this area, 38% of Jews in hiding in this area survive, compared with less than 20% in the Amsterdam area. One of the members of the resistance was the Protestant Reverend Lendert Overdahl. He is the person who found the safe addresses for people who needed to go into hiding. My father mentioned him many times in his video, and we found our way into the closed-up Great Church in Enschede just to photograph this plaque recognizing Reverend Lendert Overdahl. Before we get to Liberation Day, you might be wondering how I located the former Lansing farm. It's a bit of a story, but I was connected by somebody in that Enschede synagogue. I just told him a little bit of the history, and he took it upon himself to find this man, Jan Lansink, whose father and grandfather had hidden my family. Now, I knew that my father had been in touch with him over the years, but the language barrier prevented Jan Jr., I call him because his grandfather was also Jan, and me from continuing the relationship after my father died in 1994. Jan had brought my father back to the farmhouse back in 1991 when my father visited, and he brought us there too. And in this picture, Jan is looking at one of those Tikva Israel tokens that Josh made that I gave to him. Now, let's resume with Liberation Day. Back on the farm, do you remember the date that Ralph said they were liberated? April 1st. It's also April Fool's Day. My father always loved April Fool's Day. And then I understood why. It was Easter Sunday, and I believe it was also the 3rd day of Passover, though I'm not sure if they even were aware of that. So on April 1st, 1945, Allied soldiers arrived to the Lansing farm. Let's listen.
We came downstairs, and the Canadian soldier said to my mother, he says, you know, the button came off my pants. Can you sew it? And it was like a mitzvah. She was smiling and enjoying every moment of it, and she sewed the button up.
the best part of the whole story, but the best part is hearing my father laugh. This is the only time I really hear him be happy. I was so taken with this story that the first act in liberation that my Oma did was to sew a button of a Canadian World War II uniform that I had to go onto eBay and find one. So I found one. Who knows, maybe it's the one she sewed, but I wear it. So I'm just so blessed to have a replica of that button. So the rest of Holland is liberated actually on May 4th and 5th. They celebrated Bevrijdingsdag yesterday, a holiday I never knew about until a handful of years ago. It's Liberation Day in Holland. But back in 1945, my great-grandmother Selma is very ill, and she dies on May 7th. So 79 years ago tomorrow. And she's buried in a Jewish cemetery near the farm. This photo on the left was taken in the 1940s, and here are my brother and me visiting, leaving one of the Tikvat Yisrael tokens at her grave before reciting the mourner's Kaddish. Selma doesn't live to see the end of World War II in Europe, which is declared on May 8th with Germany's surrender. My Oma and father moved back to Enschede in 1945 with the help of Farmer Lansing. He was very, very good to them. And in 1946, my Oma receives this letter from the Dutch Central Registration Office for Jews. In French, it explains that her husband, my grandfather Moritz, was deported from Drancy to his death in Auschwitz. Now, in most groups, I ask if they know how many people were murdered in the Holocaust. We know that 6 million Jewish people were murdered. I feel like it's also important to acknowledge the other groups of people who were murdered in the Holocaust. So I am hopefully going to share that with you. Up to 250,000 people with disabilities living in institutions were murdered. 250,000 to 500,000 Romani people were murdered. An unknown number of homosexual people were murdered. Also targeted and murdered were Freemasons, Jehovah's Witnesses, political prisoners, Serbs, and Slovenes. And that doesn't include the 3 million Soviet prisoners of war and 1.8 million non-Jewish Polish civilians. Think about this. If we collectively, human beings, aren't the ones to speak up for others, who's going to speak up for us? Even if you are not Jewish, you probably know someone who falls in one of these other categories. At some point, my Oma learns of the relatives and friends who were killed, plus her mother, whom I do consider a victim of the Holocaust. These are just the closest of her relatives, the ones I could fit on one page. And you may notice down at the bottom, or I'll ask you to make notice of down at the bottom, Harry Slugger, the man who helped my family, and his 7-year-old son, Max, were murdered in the Holocaust. Harry's wife, Max's mom, is known to a couple of people in this room, 2 cousins in this room. She moved to New York City. In 1947, my Oma and Dad pack up their crate labeled for Riverside Drive in New York City, where Miriam's family lived. Miriam is with us today. And they take the ship, the Marine Falcon, to America. Apparently, according to the back of a photograph that my grandmother wrote on, they're all seasick on the journey. And for some reason, that normal discomfort, as awful as it is, it makes me smile. I'm so glad they got to have that kind of discomfort and come to start a new life. In fact, my Oma marries again. My father works hard. He marries Margie, my mom, and lives the American dream for my brother and me. We're skipping a couple of pictures here. Today, I want you to focus on my family's survival story and the upstanders, those who found within themselves the spark to act with courage, compassion, and kindness. I wish to bring them fully in the room with us, even those I haven't told you about today. I'm going to say their names aloud, and I invite you to join me if you're moved to do so. Some of them have nobody to remember them, and these are the righteous people, most of them not Jewish, who saved people. Mr. and Mrs. Imping, the limousine driver, Jan Duking, Henricus Nicholas Wiedels, Jan Anton Beaumont, families Kussel and Speer, Queen Wilhelmina, Harry and Hilda Slaher, Sieg Minko, Bernard Sanders, Reverend Lendert Overdown, Jan Lansink, Gerhard Lansink and Mina Lansink, and the resistance. You know, we as human beings, each of us has that spark within us, and I appeal to you today as a testament to the 6 million Jewish people who perished and to the numerous righteous people. Please, don't simply stand by and watch when someone needs help, no matter how far away they might be. I'd like to ask all of you to stand up when someone is in need. I ask you to speak out against bullies and autocrats, against dictators and terrorists and hate mongers. I ask you to perform even the smallest acts of kindness to help make our world a better place. Thank you. I think we have a few minutes, maybe a few minutes for Q&A. Somebody will let me know when we need to stop. And those of you who are on Zoom, we're not ignoring you. Feel free to type your questions into the chat, and somebody over here will read those questions aloud. So we're going to start in this room. Does anybody have a question? Yes. So did they have trouble coming to this country? I don't know how long it took them to get their papers in place once the war was over. I know Moritz wanted to come to this country, and because there were quota systems in place in the 1930s and 1940s, he wasn't able to get his family out. So, but that's a good question. I love getting questions that I don't know the answer to, so I'm gonna see if I can find out more about that. Thank you for asking. You know, when I talk in schools, I tell the kids, please ask me questions I don't know the answers to, because I look it up and I get back to them. So, thank you. And another question from this room, if there are any. Gary, were there any on Zoom?
I just want to be careful.
One on Zoom has a question. Please feel free to raise your hand.